Welcome back to my series on Jupiter in the 10th house. We're now on episode 7, so we're going to be talking about Jupiter in the 10th house in Virgo, and the example chart is from Sister Emmanuel. In the first episode of this series, we established the basic idea of what Jupiter in the 10th house is like. You can watch or rewatch that, but for now, the summary of it is Jupiter in the 10th house is sage-like, transparent, and famous. If you want to watch the video, by the way, I'll put the link in the description below. Now what we want to do is ask for the same kind of capsulized information about Jupiter in Virgo. And then we'll be able to interpret Jupiter in the 10th house and in Virgo. So I have already done the video on Jupiter in Virgo, and I'll put the link to that as well in the description if you want to follow up on the details. For now, for our purposes, it's enough to just give you the shorthand terms. Jupiter in Virgo is very organizational, very intelligent, and very pure. By pure, I mean things like clean and so forth, but I also mean very honest, very pure internally and externally. And by intelligent, I mean learned and thoughtful. And by organizational, we mean very good at leading others in an intelligent way, not in a dominant way. Now, with these two bits of information, one about Jupiter in the 10th house and another about Jupiter in Virgo, you could go forward and say, now I should know about Jupiter in Virgo in the 10th house. But I would encourage you first to extract one more bit of information. If you use the whole sign house system, which I highly recommend, then you can do the following. You can say, hey, if Jupiter is in Virgo in the 10th house, then it has to be the first and the fourth lord. And so now you can interpret that. The 10th is the house of the public, the first is the house of the self, and the fourth is the house of devotion. So when the first and the fourth lord combine and go into the 10th house, you get a sense of a person who has dedicated themselves to society, or you could say to their career. That will just really depend upon the specifics of the chart, whether it actually comes out tasting like dedication to the society or dedication to their role in the society. With these three things known, we can do a very good job of interpreting what Jupiter in Virgo 10th house should be basically read like. What does it really symbolize? Jupiter in Virgo is very pure, and Jupiter in the 10th house is very transparent. They're shorthand terms for the same thing. So if Jupiter is in Virgo in the 10th house, it signifies somebody who is ethical. By that, I mean they're honest, they're open, they like to do things the right way, they don't like to lie about how things were done, and they don't really like to trample or transgress on anybody else's rights. Secondly, Jupiter in Virgo is very intelligent, and Jupiter in the 10th house is very sagacious. So Jupiter in Virgo in the 10th house signifies someone who is quite intelligent. In this case, it really means they're very learned, and they really learned and figured out how to influence people to do things the right way and to be good. Finally, we have the lordship issue. The first and the fourth lords going to the 10th house signifies dedication to society. Well, that's kind of similar to Jupiter in Virgo being organizational or good leader, which is also kind of similar to Jupiter in the 10th house being famous, which means a recognized leader. So let us say with confidence that Jupiter in Virgo in the 10th house signifies someone who is socially oriented. What this really means is that their identity, their sense of self, is going to be mixed with the society. It's going to be dependent upon other people. It's going to be integrated with other people. The kind of exact wording that you use will depend upon the rest of the conditions in the chart. Or if you're not a great astrologer, but you just know the person, then you can also maybe, instead of saying society, you can say career, depending on what you know about the person or how good you're able to read the entire chart together. So let's move forward on that a little bit. Let's bring in the example of an actual person, an actual chart. Soeur Emmanuel, Sister Emmanuel, the religious activist, who is well known for actually going and living with very, very poor people to try to help them. Is she a good example of everything that we've said so far? She's really, really, really a good example of an ethical person, an intelligent person, and that type of intelligence, the intelligence that's trying to fix social problems. Is she socially oriented? You see in her case, you will really orient it to be she's dedicated herself to the world. Now, to answer the question of why do you interpret it that way in her case, you need to look at her chart. So let's do that. She's a very, very religious person, evidently from this chart. And that's why you would frame that previous dynamic as dedication of the self to the benefit of others. How do we know from this chart that she's a very religious person? First of all, just the fact that Sagittarius is rising, which is a given if the 10th house is Mercury. But along with that, there's K2 in the first house. So that's going to suggest this person is possibly very, very spiritual, or at the very least, not very normal, not very mainstream. Then the key thing for the religious thing is Jupiter is the only planet in her chart that is in the Kendra, the only real planet. And the Kendra are the angles, the most prominent places of the chart. The angles are houses 1, 4, 7, and 10. So when you see a chart with only Jupiter in the Kendra, then that Jupiter is very, very prominent in that chart. And Jupiter is a planet of religiosity. So as long as that Jupiter is not messed up, then you can feel pretty confident this person is very religious. And you should look for confluence, you should look for confirmation from other sources. For example, the Sagittarian rising, or for example, the fact that her moon or her mind is in her 9th house, the house of religion. Now, another thing about her is this dedication to society took the form of a renunciation of her own comforts and pleasures. How would you see that from this chart? Why is she so renounced? Well, it's not difficult to see because her 9th and her 10th lords have gone and joined in the 12th house. So what that is a Raja Yoga in the house of renunciation or humility or self-abnegation. A Raja Yoga is when, basically, the most basic form of Raja Yoga is when the lord of a trine combines with the lord of an angle. So you have the 9th, the most prominent trine, and the 10th lord, the most prominent angle, combining in her chart. So it's a significant Raja Yoga, but it's not in a prominent place, a prominent house. It's in the 12th house, the house of renunciation. Furthermore, she has a debilitated Saturn on her 5th house cusp, more or less. Sexual drives result usually in family, which result usually in children, which result usually in a need for a home, etc. So if Saturn is debilitated on the 5th house cusp, it reduces all of that, which equals to a person like her. Furthermore, that Saturn debilitated in her 5th house is aspecting her 11th lord, which is very important for this, because the 11th lord governs pleasure and enjoyment. And that 11th lord not only is aspected by a debilitated Saturn, but also conjoined the 12th lord. So now you can see how you use the individual chart to fine-tune the soft focus details that you get from doing something like figuring out how to interpret Jupiter and Virgo in the 10th house, which in turn is a refinement on a softer focus template of what Jupiter in the 10th house itself represents. If you want to understand the whole context of your chart, the soil in which your interpretive seeds grow, then visit my website, vicdecara.com, and click Readings. My complete chart report explains each and every nook and cranny of your chart and will keep you occupied in self-discovery for years. I also have 2 groundbreaking new reports. The first of these, Your Nakshatra, organizes your active nakshatras in order of their importance to you and presents the fundamental interpretations for the planets that occupy them. The newest report, Star Strength, uses a system called Tarahabala to unfold 90 interpretations of the nuanced relationships between all the planets in your chart, which paints a rich and detailed picture of how your various strengths cooperate or compete with each other. Order these or any of my reports and accelerate your journey to deeper self-understanding.